Hello everyone, thank you for joining me on this wonderful day and welcome. My name is Abby and I am the designer behind Sew Homey. Today I'm super excited because I have a tutorial for you guys on how to crochet this summer inspired clutch that has a nice squeeze frame closure at the top. So I will first start out by showing you how to crochet the marguerite stitch, aka the star stitch. Then we will move on to the base, which is made out of single crochets and it gives you a nice bottom to the clutch. Then I will show you how to whip stitch because we crochet this in two separate panels and the whip stitch will seam those two panels together. And then we will finish this video off by me showing you how to sew the flex frame to the top. This is an original pattern that I designed and the name of it is the MJ44 because it is the third pattern from the Mary Jane series, which is a collection of 3 patterns that I designed just for the summer. Now I feel that crochet can be put on the back burner during those hot summer days, and that's for various reasons, I suppose, but I wanted to design a few patterns that were fun, easy, and quick to work up so that you can get your crochet fix during the summer, but then you can also get back to all those fun activities that you have planned. The Mary Jane series was inspired by the marguerite stitch. The moment that I saw it, I fell in love with it, and as soon as I crocheted it up with the yarn, I fell in love even more with the thick and textured fabric. I immediately started dreaming up pattern ideas. So the first pattern in the collection is the MJ42, which is a sunglasses case, and this pattern is crocheted in purely marguerite stitches, and then I added a metal flex frame at the top. And then the second pattern that I came up with is the MJ43, and that is a coin purse. And the coin purse has marguerite stitches, but the base or the bottom of it is made out of single crochets, so it gives a nice contrast between the two different textures. And then that one is also finished off with a metal flex frame. And if you're interested, I did film 2 separate tutorials, one for the sunglasses case, one for the coin purse, and I'll leave the links down below for you in the description box. And then that brings us to the MJ44, which is the clutch, and that's the tutorial that I have for you guys today. So I designed this clutch mainly because I needed a project bag. There's this spot in town that my boyfriend and I go to just to hang out on the weekends sometimes, and I love to bring a project to knit on, and most of the time that's socks now, just because I really enjoy it and it's pretty mindless. So I have this black bag that I normally throw it into, but I wanted something a little bit more original and a little nicer looking. So that's really what spurred the idea for a clutch. I chose to use Lion Brand Comfy Cotton Blend yarn, which is a number 3 or a DK weight yarn, and the fiber content is 50% cotton, 50% polyester. I just wanted a yarn that was very durable and that it was washable as well, and cotton is a very strong fiber, so I figured this one would do, and I already had a skein of it on hand, so it worked out perfectly. So in addition to the yarn, you will need a few more materials that are all laid out in the pattern, which I'll tell you how to get in just a moment, but you're going to want to grab a crochet hook, which should be size 4mm or a size G. You'll also need a tapestry needle, a metal flex frame, a pair of pliers, and then scissors. Then you want to grab the pattern, and you can get your hands on that in a few different ways. So the first and probably easiest is going to be through my website. I do provide a free version of this pattern there, and I will have the link for you down in the description box below, and you can find all of the list of materials and the written instructions there. You can also choose to support me as a designer and purchase my PDF version of this pattern, and you can get that through Ravelry or my Etsy shop. And in this version of the pattern, I do provide additional resources, and they are both in the format of video and pictures, just to hopefully help every different learning style. Last thing I'll say about the pattern is that if you want to get access to all 3 patterns, sign up to my newsletter. I have a way for you to get all 3 of those, and I'll send all of those details to your inbox. And all of those links are provided in the description box below. We are now ready to begin making our clutch. So I'm going to first show you how to crochet the marguerite stitch. The marguerite stitch is a loop stitch variation, which just means that we are going through the row below and pulling up loops through those stitches, and all those loops are held on the crochet hook. And then we join all those loops together with the single strand of yarn, which with that description, it might sound a little bit complicated, but once you get the hang of it, it's actually a pretty simple stitch pattern. So let's go ahead and give it a try. I'll show you exactly how to do it. So to begin the marguerite stitch, we are going to make a simple slip knot and then slide that onto our crochet hook. And then we are ready to chain that foundation row. So I'm going to chain 13, and you want to make sure that these are loose. You want to make sure that they're loose, not too tight. And I'm just chaining 13 for the purposes of this tutorial. I'm just going to show you on a small swatch, but you definitely want to follow the pattern for the exact number of chains to make, because that will obviously alter your size, and to make the clutch you want it to end up being or measuring 6 inches. So let me see how many. We have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. I ended up with 1 extra. Alright, so now that I have the number of chains that I want to begin with, I want to show you what a chain actually looks like, because this is going to be very important for our first row of the marguerites. So what we're looking at right here is the front side of the chain. And we know that because there's these V's, and each V equals 1 chain. But whenever we flip it over, the look changes. You can see these dashed lines, and it's almost, it is like a chain. It's linking each stitch together. And then whenever you flip it over, you can kind of see those ridges along the back side. So whenever you traditionally make a stitch into a chain, you're going to typically go through the top of that chain. So where that V is, you typically go through the very top part of the stitch. However, for this pattern, you want to work into the back bumps, which are these ridges all along the back side. And what that's going to do is whenever you work into that back bump, it's going to push the V's or the front side of the stitches to the bottom, and it's going to leave us with a very nice and even edge. So that is why we want to do that. So let's go ahead and get started with the first row of marguerites. So ultimately we want to end up with 6 loops on our hook. So we have to pull up yarn through the back bumps and put loops on our hook for the next 5 stitches, since we already have 1. So I'm already on the back side, and I'm looking at the very first back bump, and that's where I want to insert my hook. So I typically use my fingernail to help guide that over my hook, because it can get a little tight, but do be mindful of how tight you're pulling this yarn, because that is going to affect the size of that back bump and can make it super hard. So don't pull on the yarn too much before you pull up a loop through there. And that's typically just for the first one. But now that we have our hook through the back bump, we yarn over and pull a loop through. So now we have 2 loops on our hook, and we want to go to the next back bump, insert the crochet hook, yarn over, pull a loop through. So we have 3, so we want to do this 3 more times. So we're going to go through the next 3 back bumps and do the same exact thing. So here's that next back bump. Insert the hook, yarn over, pull yarn through. Find the next back bump, yarn over, pull it through. So once we end up with 6 loops on our hook, you want to yarn over. We're going to pull that yarn all the way through those 6 loops. Now we have those all connected on this one piece of yarn, and we want to chain 1 so that we can close that. So this is going to be the bottom half of our very first marguerite stitch. And now to continue, we're going to do the same thing all the way across, but it's going to look a little bit different. So right here where we made that chain 1, this right here is called the eye. That space right there. That is the eye. And then these down here, the loops that we had on our hook, each loop is 1 leg. So this is going to be the first one, and then this one over here is going to be our last one. And I'm going to be referring to the eyes and the legs in the next part of the video, so that's why I mention it, so that you know what I'm talking about. So we already have 1 loop on our hook, and we're just going to continue. We want 5 more loops to equal 6 on our hook. So we're going to insert our hook into the eye, which is where that chain space is. Yarn over, draw up a loop. You're going to find that last leg, which is this one right here. We're going to insert our hook through the front side of that leg, pull yarn through there, and then right here, that space right here, that's the chain where that last leg came through. We want to go ahead and drop a loop through that same chain, yarn over, pull through, and now we go through the next 2 back bumps and pull up a loop. So here's 1, if I can get it, and here is 2. Oh, maybe. All right, so now we have 6 loops on our hook yet again. So we yarn over, pull yarn through. Those are all the legs. We yarn over to chain 1 and close. So I'll go ahead and show you one more time, just so that you can get the hang of it, because it takes a little bit of practice. But this one will be our second marguerite stitch. It's the bottom half of it. So we have 1 loop. We go ahead and take our hook through the eye, pull up a loop, find that last leg, pull up a loop, find that same chain space is where that last leg is coming from, yarn over, pull through, and then into the next 2 back bumps, pull up a loop. And whenever you make your loops, make sure that you're not pulling on the yarn too tight. You want to keep these pretty loose. Then we pull the yarn all the way through, chain 1 to close. So I have just a couple more, and I'm going to go ahead and finish those, but meet me back at the very end after you've completed your last one. Okay, so I just completed that last marguerite, or that last, yeah, it's a marguerite. It's like half of it. But I finished my last one, and before we go on to the next row, we want to put a half double crochet into that last chain space, where that last loop was drawn up, so where that last leg is. So we want to go ahead and make a half double crochet, and this is just going to give you a nice and even edge along the side. So that is the first row of the 2-row repeat. So that's going to give you half of that marguerite stitch. But now we want to go on to row number 2. So we are going to chain 1 and flip our fabric over. So this row is going to be of all single crochets, and it's going to give you the top of the marguerite. So we're going to put a single crochet into the top where we just put a half double crochet. So here's one. Then we're going to find the next eye. So this is the half double crochet. This right here, that space, is the eye. We put one single crochet there. And then we're going to find that next eye and put 2 single crochets. Oops. So that's 1. And then we put 2 in that same eye. We go over to the next eye and do the same thing. 2 single crochets. So I have 1 single crochet there, 2 single crochets. Move on over to the next eye right here. 2 single crochets into that same eye. Then for me, this is my last eye, and I'm going to put 2 single crochets. And then don't forget, we're not going to stop right here because you'd have an uneven edge and it will make all of your stitches off. So we put 1 single crochet into the top of that chain space right here. So, and there you have it. That is the 2-row repeat for the Marguerite stitch, and this is what you should have so far. But now I want to show you how you get started on the 3rd row, because we're going to continue just as we did for the 1st row, where we're picking up all those loops, but it looks a little bit different on how you get started. So after your last single crochet, you're going to chain 2. And now, just as we did on the first part of the chain, like that first row of chains, we're going to work into the back bumps. So we want 6 loops, remember, 6 loops on our hook. So we already have 1, so we're going to go through the back bump of that first chain and pull a loop through. Then we're going to go through the back bump of that second chain and pull a loop through. Then I'm going to flip my piece over this way, and that's going to push the side or the front of that chain 2. It's going to push it along the edge, so we're going to have a nice clean edge on the side, just as we did for the bottom. So we have 3 loops here. We're going to go ahead and pull up a loop through the next 3 single crochets. So now we have 6 loops. We yarn over, pull through, chain 1 to close. Now you're just going to continue the way that we did, where we just pull a loop through the eye, pull a loop through that last leg, pull a loop through that same space as where that last leg is coming from, and then pull a loop through the next 2 stitches, yarn over, pull through, chain 1 to close. Oops. That's what I get for going too fast. Alright, so you're just going to continue on this way, and then you're going to chain 1 and then do row number 2 again. That does not change at all. Now just going to repeat that for the number of times that the pattern states to get the number of rows that you need for the clutch. After you complete the number of rows of marguerites according to the pattern, it's time to move on to the base of the clutch. So in this segment, I'm going to show you how to use the single crochet and a simple decrease so that we can create this nice and rounded base. So I finished my little swatch of Marguerite stitches. I added a few more rows to it so that it's a bit bigger. But if you're following my pattern and you crocheted the full-size clutch, yours is going to be much bigger. It should be about this size compared to mine, where I only chained 13 to begin with. So this one's much larger. Now what we want to do is we're done with this yarn right here. So I am just going to cut off a little tail. It doesn't matter how long it is. We're just going to weave it in at the end, so you can, leave enough so that you can weave it in, but don't leave too much because there's no point. So we cut the yarn because we don't want to add the base to the top anymore. That's not what we want for the clutch. It looks different than the coin purse. If you saw that one, we crocheted this differently. What we want is the Marguerite stitch has like a semicircle kind of thing, where like the legs come out, and you can, I don't know, I like to call it like a sunburst or something, I don't know, where it kind of just looks like a plant almost, with the lines coming out where all those loops were picked up. So what you want to do is we have it like this, where you see the marguerites and the half circles on the side. So now you want to flip it this way so that that yarn tail and the top is on your left, and then this is where we added the half double crochets at the end of the row for the first row of the 2-row repeat on the marguerite stitch. So this is how we want to be looking at our fabric, because this is the way that the clutch is going to look. Let me grab this for you so you can actually see. So this is the clutch, and this is what it's going to look like ultimately. So you can see my little swatch is facing the same way as the clutch. But I'm telling you this because we want to add the base along the bottom of it, and we're going to be using the single crochet. But in order to do that, we have to flip our piece of work where the half double crochets are actually facing the top, and then this is the edge where those chain twos were from starting on the marguerites. That's what's at the bottom. So now it looks like it's upside down, and that's what you want. Okay, since we have it flipped upside down and we have our half double crochets at the top, now we're going to add the base along the top of the half double crochets. And for each half double crochet, we're going to add 3 stitches. And that's just going to keep it even, and we're going to have a nice row. It's not going to be increasing too much or decreasing too much if we add 3 per half double crochet. So on this row, I have 4 rows, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4 half double crochet. So I'm going to end up with 12 stitches at the end. So since we clipped our yarn, we have to add new yarn, which is not difficult. All you do is grab your hook, grab your yarn, and we're going to find that first stitch. So I'm just going to go in through the top right here and insert my hook. Then I have my yarn, and I'm just going to make a loop. So I have it just pinched between my fingers. Make a loop, and then I like to hold it tight between my fingers. Pull that through. Then I'm going to drop the tail. So here's my tail. I'm going to hold it behind and pinch it here so that it's not going to move, and I'm going to have a tail to weave in at the end. So now I have yarn that's semi-attached, not really. We have yarn coming through there, but we want to go ahead and chain 1, and that's going to attach it to the piece of fabric. And then I'm going to go ahead and make a single crochet so that it will stay secure. And then you can tug on that yarn tail so that it tightens on the side, and that's our first single crochet, I'm sorry. And that's the first stitch of our base. So now from here, I already have 1, and I said I need 3 stitches per half double crochet, and my half double crochet is here. So I have 1. I'm just going to find that next space where it makes sense to make a stitch. So here I have the half double crochet, and I like to go through the 2 loops on the side of the half double crochet, and then I'm just going to make a single crochet. So that's 2 for 1. Now I need to make a 3rd stitch. So I like to go through that a little hole that's right next to that, make a single crochet. So that's 3. That completes 1 half double crochet. Now I need to add 3 more for the next half double crochet, which is right here. So I'm going from that hole, and I'm looking for the next space where it makes sense to make a single crochet. So I see a little opportunity right here. There's a small piece of yarn. There's a space right there. So I'm going to make a single crochet right there. And then again, this is the half double crochet, and I go through the top 2 loops, single crochet. So that's 2. I need the third one, so that's where that big gap is right here. I just add a stitch there. That completes another set of 3, so now I need 3 more, so we're just going to repeat that process. We see that there's a space right here through that yarn, single crochet, go through the side of that half double crochet, going through the top 2 loops, make a single crochet. You see that big gap right there, make a single crochet, and then repeat that process. We see a small gap right here, we can put a single crochet there, and then we get to the side, we have 2 there, and then here we have our last one here. Oops. Trying to keep that yarn out of the way. And now we have the first row of our base. So I mentioned before that we are going to learn how to decrease because of the base. We want to round the edges. So a decrease is very simple, and I'll show you that in just a second. I just wanted to give you an example of why we are decreasing. And it's just because it shapes that fabric a little bit more, and after we whip stitch it together, it gives it a nice little base that is just a little bit rounded, and it gives a little bit more shape and a little more character to it since this is all squared at the top. So this is what we're striving for. So in order to do that, we have our foundation of single crochets for the base. So now we're going to chain 1 and turn, and we're going to begin our decreases on this row. So all a decrease is taking 1 stitch out of the row at a time. And the way you do that is crocheting 2 stitches together at one time. So I have 1 stitch here, and we're going to decrease 1 stitch at each edge. So 1 stitch from this side and 1 stitch from this side. So we're going to begin by drawing a loop through that first stitch, and then instead of completing a single crochet, we're going to go into that next stitch and pull up a loop. So we should have 3 loops on our hook. Now we yarn over and pull through all 3 loops, and that ties both of those stitches together into 1. So you can see that 1 stitch there. So we took out 1 stitch on the right side. Now we crochet along the top, just 1 single crochet into every single stitch until you get to the last 2 stitches. Alright, so I've made it to my last 2 stitches. You can see them here. Now we're just going to do the same exact thing as we did on that on the first 2 stitches. So we insert our hook, yarn over, pull up a loop. Instead of yarning over and pulling through all 2 or both loops, we stick our crochet hook into that last stitch, draw up a loop, and then we pull a loop through both of those. So now when we chain 1 and turn it, we have 1 less stitch on each side. So that means that I began with 12 stitches, so now if I count them, I will have only 10. And that's what we want to continue to do. So now on the next row, you're just going to do a regular row of single crochet, and then the next row you'll decrease by 2 stitches. And you'll just follow that according to the pattern, and you will end up with a nice base that will be rounded on the edges. After you have both panels crocheted, then it's time to seam the 2 panels together using what is called the whip stitch. So this segment is actually an excerpt from the MJ43 tutorial, which is for the coin purse. So you're going to notice that the size of the coin purse is a lot smaller than what your clutch is. However, the same exact technique applies. I would suggest that you actually use stitch markers to pin your two panels together so that it's easier to seam them together. It'll just keep it all nice and straight and even. That'll totally be up to you, but you might find that easier if you start off that way. Now, I forgot to mention this at the beginning, which is probably what I should have done, but I did end up blocking my two panels before whip stitching them together. I just found that that helped even out the edges, which made seaming a little bit easier, so you might keep that in mind as well. So I went ahead and threaded my tapestry needle because that's what you need at this stage. And we have both of our panels. We know that this is the bottom because that's the base on both sides. So now we want to take one panel and place it on top of the other one. And this one, so in my sunglasses case, the MJ42, I recommended that you use stitch markers to hold the pieces in place, and you can totally do so, but I think that these are small enough that it doesn't really matter, but that's totally up to you. But the whip stitch is super simple, probably like the easiest way to seam things together. So I'm going to take my tapestry needle, my yarn is coming from this side, I'm going to take my needle and come towards me, and I'm going to go through that first stitch on both sides. So here I have that first one, and then I'm trying to get through that second one, just like so. Take the yarn and pull it all the way through. Next side. Since we're actually working on the sides of stitches, so this is each row. So you just want to go down to the next row, take your tapestry needle, under first side, under second side. And then you just pull that yarn all the way through, but you went the opposite way. So I ended on this side because I took the needle away from me. Next side, or next row I should say. We go to the next one, and you just whip stitch that together. Come towards you, insert needle, pull it all the way through, and make sure that you're pulling it tight after every stitch, because otherwise you could have issues. It'll be a little bit harder to tighten up, so make sure that you pull it tight all the way every time you do a stitch. So you just work back and forth, back and forth. That's literally all there is to the whip stitch. Finally, all we need to do is sew the flex frame to the top of the clutch, and then we are done. So let me go ahead and show you how to do that. Alright, so this is what we have so far. This is after whip stitching the sides and the bottom together. So our two panels are seamed, and we have this little pouch. You can see the top is open, but then everything else is closed. So you can see those beautiful marguerite stitches at the top, and then we have the single crochet base here at the bottom. And now we want to finish this pouch off by adding the flex frame to the top. So that's the portion of the video that I'm going to show you now. And this is what a flex frame is going to look like. Which this one's actually smaller. This is the size I think I used for the sunglasses case, but this is what it's going to look like whenever you get it. It's for the clutch though, you are going to have a longer one, which I'll show you in just a second. I just wanted to show you what it looks like by itself. It's bendable, which is how you're going to open the purse, but it comes like this. It's open, and then so now I have this one, which I have already covered in yarn, because this is the first part that I want to show you, because this is how we will attach it. Let me grab this to the flex frame. So it will all blend together. You won't see any of this. The only part you will see is basically the hinge and just that bronze part for the flex frame that I have here. Okay, so now we are ready to start wrapping yarn along this side of the flex frame. So since we want our long yarn tail to end on this side, just like we did here, we want that long yarn tail right here, we are going to start by tying the yarn that is attached to the skein on the left side, and then we will start wrapping inward and then we will tie it off right here. So we're gonna have the exact same thing, but whenever we seam it together, we'll start from this side and sew this to the back panel, and then we'll start from here on this side, basically picking up where we left off here, and then we will seam the front panel to this side. So that's where we are headed. So this is going to count as our first wrap, and now we have a yarn tail that we're going to hide on the inside as we wrap our yarn around, and then we have our yarn that's still attached to the skein. I recommend doing about 3 times the number of stitches at the top. So for the clutch purse, I think I'll probably do it about 90 times. I think I did it about a little bit over 90. I think I did like 100, but honestly it doesn't matter. I just try to do about 3 times the number of stitches that I have at the top. And if I get more or I get less, I won't be too worried about it. But we just start wrapping, and make sure that you hold your yarn tail in the center so that you are wrapping around it. I like to get a good number of these, and now I'm at the hinge, or not the hinge, I don't really know what to call that, but this catches really bad on the yarn. So I like to go ahead and push these together before I get over that so that all of those stitches remain on that side. And I'm just wrapping so that you get a nice and even line on the front side, because this is the side that you're going to be looking at. So you want it to look nice, and you don't want the yarn to get crossed or anything. So we're just going to continue wrapping inward. And then whenever you can kind of see some of the flex frame like you can here, I just like to squish it together. Just kind of hold it, squish it together. And this is going to allow you to be able to get 3 times the number of stitches at the top. Alright, so I made it to the end of wrapping this side of the flex frame. So now I want to make sure that I have finished wrapping. So this is the last wrap, and it's coming from the front side. And the yarn that's still attached to the skein is coming down. This way we are going to end up tying this piece of yarn to the first piece on the back here. So you want to do the same exact thing on the opposite side, but since I already had this side done, you'll just do go ahead and do the same exact thing. Start from the inside, and you'll end up with the long yarn tail on the outside. Just do them both exactly the same, because your yarn will be in the place that you want it. That is how you wrap the yarn around a metal flex frame. And now I want to show you how to actually attach this to the clutch. We are ready to grab the clutch, which I have mine here. We're ready to grab the clutch, and we're going to seam or sew the clutch to the flex frame. Now I like to start with the back panel, and whenever you're looking at it, it doesn't matter which side is the back side. It's just the side that is opposite from the one facing me. That's all I mean by that. There's not like a right side or wrong side to the clutch, but since I have my clutch this way, this is the front panel, and then this is the back panel. So I'm going to start on this one, and since our yarn tail is on the right side, we're going to start seaming from right to left along the back panel. Now whenever I told you to wrap the yarn, I told you to do about 90, and it was okay if you went over. Now that's because I have 10 marguerite stitches, and I'm going to try to get 3 stitches per marguerite. So 3 times 30 is 90, which is where I got the number for wrapping. But whenever I counted this side, at least I think I ended up with like 106 or something, because whenever I got to 90, I still had quite a bit of room and you would have been able to see the flex frame. So I went ahead and wrapped it additional times, and that's not going to matter. You're just going to pick up more of these stitches as you sew the flex frame to the clutch. And I'll show you all of that in just a second. It will all make sense, I hope. But I just wanted to mention that before we got started. I'm starting on the right side. It closes this way, so it's going to be on the back side whenever I sew it all together. And then we're looking at our clutch, and you want to try to keep it as even as possible. So whenever you're looking at the back side of this, you can kind of see where the whip stitch, it gets a little bit off. You just want to try to keep the seams in the center and then the flex frame in the middle of that seam. Because otherwise, if you start like too far in, your flex frame will start here and you'll be able to see the gap, and it's going to kind of it would seam it where it gets a little funky and a little off. So you want to try to keep it as even as possible, keeping the seams in the center. And then whenever we look at this back panel, I like to look for the seam. Since we're starting on the right side, I'm looking at that seam on the right side, and I'm just going to open this a little bit. You can see the seam right here. That's where we whip stitched it. And then on the other side, you can see that marguerite stitch. That's that first one on the back panel. So I'm just going to look for that very first, it looks kind of like a stitch. I'm just going to look for this first part, which is the closest to, I apologize for that road noise if you can hear that. I live by a very busy street. I apologize. But as I was saying, this is that first hole that I want to go through. It looks like it's about the first part of that marguerite stitch, and then it's the closest one to that seam right here. And I'm inserting the needle from, I guess, from the outside, or the inside, I'm sorry, the inside of the fabric to the outside. So I'm going from wrong side to right side, basically, where the needle ends up on the outside. So then I'm just going to pull that yarn all the way through, and I have a hair, and I'm going to pull it as close as I can for now, and then I'm going to pick the flex frame with the clutch up. And this side you're going to see flopping around. That's totally fine. There's nothing you can do about it because we have to seam one side at a time. So you can see yours might do the same thing, where that first part, it gets a little loose sometimes and it can come over that corner. That's not going to be a big deal. Just use your finger or your tapestry needle if you have to, just to shove it back over. But once it's all seamed together, it should not do that again. It just normally gives me a little bit of trouble in the very beginning. So I'm pulling as close as I can, but I'm not going to be able to get it I dropped it, sorry. I'm not going to be able to get it completely flush with the panel just yet, but I'll show you just how to start. And you'll see me kind of, it's going to wiggle around a little bit, and it's going to happen to you as well. So just bear with me. You'll see that it's a little bit tricky just to start, but once we get the first couple of stitches together, it'll be a breeze. So we're through our first stitch, and like I was saying, you want to go through 3 of the wraps of yarn. You want to go through the first 3 with your needle. So I'm going to count from the right to left. I have 1, 2, and then 3. So this is where I have 3 wraps of yarn, and I'm going to insert my needle from the left side, and I'm going to end up on the right side. So the tip of the needle is going to end up closest to the hinge. And then I'm just going to pull that yarn all the way through once I have that. And this is where you want to pull it as tight as possible. And now I want to insert the needle from, I guess, the back to the front, or the wrong side to the right side. And we're just going to go underneath that first stitch, which is that chain 1, or it's one of the first stitch of the chain one, I guess is what I mean. So then we're just going to pull our yarn all the way through, and the yarn should be coming or should end up in the front, or the back, I'm sorry, not the front, the back. And then we pull that as tight as we can. Now we use our tapestry needle again, and we're gonna go through, this time you can switch off between 3 and 4, just because we ended up with more than 90 stitches. So this time I'm just gonna pick up 4, and I'll show you that. So we count from the right side, 1, 2, 3, here's that 4th one. I'm just going underneath from the right side, or from the left side to the right side. I'm so sorry. So our needle looks kind of like that right now, and then we're just going to pull that yarn all the way through, and then pull as tight as possible. And you're going to start to see that there's these little clusters of stitches, and that's exactly what you want it to look like. We're going to go on to the next stitch, which is this, we went through that chain one. This is the second stitch of that chain 2. So we're going through the V there, and I inserted my needle from the wrong side of the fabric to the right side, so the needle ends up in the back. We pull our yarn all the way through, and then, oops. See, you'll see it gets a little, it's a little funky to work with, but as you add more, you'll see it gets a little bit easier. So we have 1, 2, 3, and I'm inserting the needle from the right, or the left side to the right side. So the tip of the needle ends up on the right by the hinge, and then you pull that through and pull it as tight as you can. All right. So that was first marguerite done, 3 stitches done. Now we have about 9 more marguerites to do. So we're just going to continue this process. Right, so I've made it to the very last stitch where I just went through the last 3 loops of yarn on the flex frame. And so now I just want to go ahead and tie that off. So I just like to go in through the same stitch basically. So this was my last one. That's where that last, I don't know if you can see that actually. This stitch right here, that was the last one that I just went into. And so I'm just gonna make sure that my needle's through that loop of yarn, and then I'm just going to, if I can get it without getting caught, I'm just gonna pull that yarn, sorry, as tight as I can. And that's going to tie it into a knot, and then I like to just knot it one more time just to be on the safe side. And then what I like to do, since we already have it open, it's not completely closed just yet, I'm going to go ahead and weave in the end through this top side, like that back part on the that back panel. So the way I do it is just pull up loops that are closest to the part that we just tied a knot to, and then I just weave in and out until I feel like it's probably secure enough. This is totally up to you how many times you want to. I normally just go back and forth for a few inches just to make sure that it's going to be secure, it's not going to come out. So now I just, my little trick is to pull the yarn pretty hard, snip it close, and then that yarn is just going to snap back inside, and you won't even be able to tell that it's there. So now we're done with one side. So the inside of your your clutch with the flex frame attached, it should look something like this, just like a little spiral of the yarn, just the way that we sewed it together. But then the other side is just going to look seamless. So now all we have left to do is complete that same exact process but for the other side of the flex frame. Alright, so this is what our clutch looks like so far. We have the flex frame completely attached to the front and the back, and it's gonna look like this. It's kind of open because this hinge is not closed just yet. So that part is really simple. All you do is grab your pliers, which you'll need, and then grab the pin that came with the flex frame. And I'm going to put that there so I don't lose it. And now, make sure that the yarn, if it did go over the corner here, make sure that you push it back before you do this. But now, we're just going to mash our, sorry if you can see. We're just going to close that hinge here just by pinching it. And sometimes it's easier if you go ahead and grab the pin and then you put it through that top one, and then I find it easier if I hold it this way. Then you can kind of finagle that pin inside that hinge and just keep pushing it until it is like so. You can't see it. All you see are these tabs right here. Oh, if you can see that. But our pin is hidden inside. But now we need to grab our pliers and close these right here. So I'm grabbing my pliers and I hold them weird. I don't know. You're just gonna try. I do it one side at a time. So I close the top. I just pushed it. And now this bottom piece needs to move away from me. So I'm gonna pull it down. So I'm just going to try and use these pliers. Oops. And I'm trying to get it closed. And there we go. And then I like to make sure that they're going to stay down just by closing on the tops of both. And now your clutch has a flex frame attached, and that's how it's going to stay closed. So now it will open like that. So there you have it. That's how you add a flex frame to the clutch. Well, I hope that you enjoyed that tutorial. I had so much fun filming this, and I'm just in love with the final product. So if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and consider subscribing to my channel. Let me know how you're going to use this clutch in the comments below, and I hope you have a wonderful day. I'll see you in the next video.